Thank you for joining us. I'm Michael Rogers, the Center Director and Professor at the University of Florida IFAS Citrus Research and Education Center. And joining me today is Dr. Tripti Vashisth, our Associate Professor of Horticultural Sciences here at the CREC in Lake Alfred. And today we're going to be talking about plant growth regulators, how you can use those in your operations to improve the health and yield of HLB diseased trees. So Dr. Vashisth, thank you for joining us.
Sure, my pleasure.
And just to start off, I want to make sure folks are aware that we're going to talk about plant growth regulators, how you can use those, but they're not the only tool that you should be using in your grove. I think everybody is familiar now with the importance of plant nutrition, your fertilization program, how it affects the tree's health and yield and fruit quality. And so that's really the foundation, I think, of what we're doing in our HLB management programs, is making sure that we have healthy trees, we're providing the right nutrients, water as the foundation. But using plant growth regulators is an additional tool that builds upon that healthy base we provide through proper fertilization. And Tripti, as we were talking a little bit earlier, some of the naturally occurring plant hormones actually play a big role in the physiology of the trees, and HLB actually starves those trees of these hormones that are important. And you were telling me earlier that in the case of one compound, gibberellic acid, the HLB diseased trees actually have produced less gibberellic acid, and so it actually affects the size of the leaves.
Correct.
So we see these little rabbit ears, we call them, on HLB diseased trees. But that's actually a result of not having enough gibberellic acid. So can you tell us a little bit more about what is gibberellic acid and how does it affect the trees?
Yes, so gibberellic acid, it's a naturally occurring plant hormone. So the plant is capable of making its own gibberellic acid to help with different processes. Gibberellic acid has many roles. So it can improve the vegetative growth, so means more leaves on the tree. It can help the fruit in growing better. It can reduce fruit drop. We know that from healthy tree literature. And it can also suppress flowering, enhance fruit sets. So gibberellic acid has multiple roles, different roles at different times of the year. And you are correct that we are seeing that gibberellic acid, less production of gibberellic acid is one of the reasons why healthy HLB trees have smaller leaves than healthy trees.
Yeah, it's interesting you were able to tie that together through your research to explain what we're seeing in growers' groves with these rabbit ears, for example, and what the basis is for that. Tripti, you mentioned that your work has shown that 5 applications is very effective of gibberellic acid for improving yield and fruit retention. Can you explain how those 5 applications work?
Right. So we start with these applications in September, and that's when the first application is made. September would be the time when the fruit is growing actively, and the gibberellic acid application at that time helps that growing fruit, gives it a little bit of boost in attaining better size and reducing some of those signals that are known to be responsible for fruit drop. Also, then as we get further in the season, November, December application are the time when the tree is getting ready for next season's flowering. So flower bud induction is happening at that time, and gibberellic acid reduces the number of flower that will be produced in that upcoming spring. So it has those different benefits, helping the growing fruit, reducing the number of flower. And anytime gibberellic acid is reducing the number of flower or number of developing buds, it is giving tree a chance to produce another leaf. So it helps with the vegetative growth too. So this application is September to January, improving your fruit growth, reducing fruit drop, reducing flowering, and enhancing vegetative growth. In addition, gibberellic acid has been shown to improve plant defense response. That would happen any time of the year. If you apply gibberellic acid, plant defense response would be boosted, but these repeated application just keeps the tree on that high accelerated mode of having good plant defense response.
So based on what you've learned on how gibberellic acid affects the plant, if growers said, okay, I really only can afford to do 1 or 2 applications, what's your timing? We're talking about Valencia here.
Okay, so I understand why somebody would want to do fewer application. Cost is the reason. I would say that the benefits are not going to be the same. 5 versus 2 are going to give you less benefits. That's obvious. But if somebody has to do it, I will suggest that apply October, November, December time frame for Valencia. This is the time when you have that growing fruit on the tree, but also the flower bud induction period is around that time. So you're suppressing next year's flowering. And I keep saying we are suppressing next year's flowering because that is really important. We don't want the tree to produce more flowers than it can handle. And that's why that time period is perfect.
Yeah, so we're wanting the tree to put more energy into supporting the fruit they produce, not produce too many fruit. And so that's for Valencia.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what about early season fruit like Hamlin?
And that's where it's a bit tricky because Hamlin, we know, develops early in the season, and most of the time people want them to be harvested by December. If you are working with Hamlin and planning to put out GA, I would say start in August, September, October. That would be a good time frame. Or if you can plan on pushing the harvest to January, that would be really good because then you can stretch out your application until November. And that will give you some time when that flower bud induction is happening. Now, I do put out flower bud induction advisories every year, every week starting from November. So I will be putting out that information if the growers are planning to use Hamlin for gibberellic acid sprays and they are considering when to stop spraying or when is that time when that flower bud induction period would be affected. I will be putting out that information. So keep looking out for that information. But again, for Hamlin, starting August, ending October, if you are planning to harvest in December, but if you can stretch out to January, go until November. Also, one thing, a lot of growers want to harvest early in the season because they want to escape that fruit drop. Now, one of the benefits that gibberellic acid has, it keeps the fruit peel strong. It keeps that peel very firm, green, and green fruit doesn't drop that easily. So if you were to plan for harvest in January, gibberellic acid sprays are going to help with that, reducing the fruit drop. So you may not have that strong desire to harvest early to escape the fruit drop because the fruit shouldn't be dropping that much.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. And again, it's important to get the gibberellic acid sprays on early to help prevent that fruit drop.
Yes.
And you talk a lot about flower bud induction and how important it is when you're using gibberellic acid. The timing, you wanted to use a later, you said maybe November application, maybe December to help
for Valencia.
On Valencia to reduce the number of flowers. And that does seem counterintuitive for some of us who maybe aren't horticulturalists. And so can you explain the benefit of those late season applications in reducing the flowers, why that's important?
Sure. So, yes, it's kind of counterintuitive that I've been saying that we need to reduce the number of flowers. Now think about our HLB affected trees. We know HLB affected trees go through a lot of twig dieback, root dieback, so they have limited resources. And with these limited resources, there is just not enough energy or carbohydrates in the tree to support the flowers or every flower. So generally in citrus, about only 1% or 2% at the most of the flowers that you see in spring ends up to be harvested. So that means 98% of those flowers are ending up on the orchard floor at some point. HLB affected trees have less resources. So first, the tree is spending resources in making those flowers, then setting fruit, and then it carries to different periods, and then that fruit drops. So we are wasting a lot of this energy in those flower formation, fruit set, all of that. So when we are reducing the number of flower, we are just better managing these resources for the tree. We don't need 100 flowers. Maybe 50 flowers is all that we need because we want flower and the fruit that will stay on the tree and continue through harvest. So this is really helpful. Gibberellic acid reduces the number of flowers. We have been seeing with these 5 applications, we reduced about 50% of the flowers, and we never ever saw a reduction in the yield. So less flower doesn't mean less fruit. Actually, we are seeing opposite of that. Better source to sink ratio, source being the leaf, sink being the fruit. Also, there are a few other benefits of these gibberellic acid application during flower bud induction period. So we reduce the number of flowers. Also, every time when we reduce the number of flower, that bud can become a vegetative bud. So instead of a flower, now you are getting a leaf, which means you are getting another source that can support the fruit. Third, gibberellic acid will also cause leafy inflorescence, and leafy inflorescence is the flower that arises with leaves attached to it. And historically, we have known that leafy inflorescence sets better fruit, grows better fruit. So having more leafy inflorescence will help in just having a better quality fruit. And lastly, gibberellic acid application is going to synchronize your flowering. So instead of having your flowering spread for 4 weeks or 6 weeks, you have more concise 3 weeks. That's what we have seen in our field studies. So all your fruit set is happening in that 3-week period, in a compact period. So all fruit is growing about at the same pace and getting ready at the same pace. So it's a good growth management. For growth management. Also, then if you were expecting any fruit drop to happen, now GA should help with reduction in fruit drop, but if you are expecting any fruit drop, it's happening only in that 3 weeks or in that period of a synchronized growth. So gibberellic acid has many benefits, especially when we are applying it in the flower bud induction period. Now, as I keep saying about we need to reduce flower, I do want to put a caution statement, not too less either. We just need a balance. So don't go beyond December applications because we don't want to suppress flowering any more than 50% of the healthy.
Mm-hmm. And you have mentioned going into January, but in some cases, but I think you kind of put a caveat, don't go past January 10th. But it really depends on how the weather is that year.
Exactly.
Flower bud induction advisory you put out. You'll be guiding people through that as well.
Yes. And as a caution, I just say December, like don't go beyond December 31st because in our studies, we have applied until January 15th. But we were paying a close attention to flower bud induction period and we didn't want to reduce any further. So out of precaution, I'm just saying don't go. If you can just stick in December, most of the growers don't want to get into another application anyways. So sticking to December is a good caution.
And your points about all the multiple uses of gibberellic acid. When you first started working with gibberellic acid, it was trying to synchronize that bloom for post-bloom fruit drop.
Exactly.
Disease control there. And so this has a lot of benefits. It's, beyond HLB control, synchronizing that bloom, getting more consistent maturity of fruit at the same time, reducing PFD. But another point I wanted just to highlight again, you mentioned that, gibberellic acid could have a negative effect if you went later than January. And you could actually reduce your yield or your flowering too far. Is that correct?
Exactly. We need flowers. We need just fewer flowers, but we do need flowers for a good yield. Now, in one of the test blocks, actually, not this particular one, but we were just playing with gibberellic acid for some experiments. And we applied in February because I just wanted to see what happens when you apply it in February on Valencia. And we did see increase in fruit drop on Valencia at that time. We did not see any reduction in flowering because the flower bud induction has already happened by February in most of the cases. So going after January 10th anyways is not going to give any benefits. It may hurt the tree. At the end of it, it's a plant hormone. It does multiple things in the tree, more than we even understand. So it's good to have a little bit caution. It's good to try it on small blocks, but don't go overboard with it either.
Right. And so if you had to make a recommendation of when really to try not and spray gibberellic acid, you're talking, mid-January through what period?
I would not apply until April.
Okay.
And the reason being, gibberellic acid is known to enhance fruit set. Okay. So if you apply gibberellic acid end of March, when the flowering is about to end, it can improve fruit set. And we don't want to do that either because we want the tree to set the fruit that it can do it naturally. We don't want to give this extra supplement at that time because like I've been saying, too much fruit set, if the tree cannot cope up with too much fruit set, it will drop at some point. So you may not have much benefit. I strongly think that we should not be applying gibberellic acid from January 10th till mid-April or even end of April. So stay away from that period I think.
So one of the benefits you mentioned, with gibberellic acid is that it can enhance that vegetative growth. And if you're doing this, say starting after April, getting into the summer months, you can get some pretty large and nice looking leaf flushes in your growth. If you were going to do that, what are your cautions looking forward for the rest of the year? If you come out in June, July, August with gibberellic acid sprays, get these large leaf flushes, could that have a negative effect on the trees or especially the yield in the coming year?
So vegetative flush, generally speaking, is always good, right? We want the trees to have good flush because leaves are going to make a better tree at the end of all of this, right? So we need leaves. But one of the caution to keep in mind is that you don't want too much of anything. We want to have a balance between the leaves and the fruit. Now, one thing that happens if you have too much of leaves, so the tree is making a lot of carbohydrates. It's photosynthesizing and storing a lot of carbohydrate. And the crop load is just moderate or low, which is normal with HLB affected trees. So the tree ends up in the winter with a lot of these stored carbohydrates. Now the tree may think that it's doing really good, so let's set more flower. And setting more flower again is not going to be beneficial because tree doesn't have a brain like we do. It just does things as they come to it. So too much carbohydrates going into winter may result in too much flowering to happen, and the tree may not be able to support too much flowering. And we want a consistency in the yield. We don't want the tree to be alternating like high yield, low yield. We just want consistency. So I would suggest if the growers are using gibberellic acid to enhance vegetative growth, still that flower bud induction overlapping GA spray will benefit you because you will optimize the flowering and you will have a better crop set happening for the upcoming years. So I think consistency is what we really need rather than one big year crop.
Okay. So, for example, if a grower did a gibberellic acid spray in the summer or early fall, got a nice big flush, they need to be thinking about the fact that could cause more fruit set than they want. And so a second application of gibberellic acid really is warranted in that November, December timeframe,
Yes.
at least on Valencia.
Yes, for the upcoming year.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's I think one of the things that our growers really need to think is with our citrus trees, there's a lot that is happening. You need not to only be thinking about this year's crop, but you have to think about what's going to happen next year because our trees are there for a very long time and we need them to be producing consistently. And anything that you do this year to your tree is going to affect your next year's crop too. So it's just not this month or this year thing. It's a long-term effect.
Okay. And your research has shown that with the gibberellic acid sprays, with the 5 applications, for example, that you've been doing, you're seeing an increase in fruit size, fruit retention, or less fruit drop.
Right.
But what about fruit quality? Does gibberellic acid have an effect on fruit quality?
So in our studies at the time of harvest, we have been doing it for 5 years, actually 6 years now. In 6 years, only 1 year out of 6 years, we have seen reduction in the total soluble solids. But other 5 years, we have not seen any less than control. So our GA treated and control have been producing the same quality fruit at the time of harvest.
Okay.
And I'll just say that 1 year, it was a particularly warm spring. That's all we could find out from the data because it's the same set of trees that have been getting sprayed with gibberellic acid. So it is possible that there might be some weather interaction of the gibberellic acid sprays. We don't know that yet. But again, 5 years, we have seen no effect.
Okay. Yeah, because I know some growers have concerns that, that maybe, the fruit does not color up. It tends to stay green longer, which in some accounts is good because it means it's going to hold on the tree longer.
Right.
But your research, you're not seeing it affecting the overall maturity of the fruit. So it should be getting the right amount of bricks and passing the maturity test when needed.
Yes. So in our studies, we have not seen that. One thing that I would suggest is it's a good idea to give about 2 months or more between your last spray and your harvest, just to give tree time to get back if there's any it's a hormone, right? Again,
Mhm.
it's a plant growth regulator. So it has different effects. Gibberellic acid should not be affecting your quality. It affects the peel color. But even giving those 2 months will help in enhancing that peel color and just developing the fruit naturally. Also, I have heard the same concerns from few growers, and I would like to emphasize that last year we followed 4 Hamlin sites that were grower sites and 5 Valencia site, again grower sites. So within these sites, the growers did leave some untreated control for us. So it's the same variety, same scion, same age. We have GA treated and we have untreated trees. And we did not see reduction in fruit quality in any of those 9 sites, including Hamlin and Valencia.
Okay.
So as of what I know, I'm not seeing any effect on the maturity.
Okay.
And we continue to look for it.
Yeah. And that's all good to know. And of course, and your advice about giving 2 months between the last gibberellic acid application and your intended harvest is good. Because we're mainly talking right now about, based on your work, is Valencia and Hamlin. If there's growers with other varieties out there, some of the fresh fruit varieties, you really have to be careful, I would say. And maybe test plots are good to try things out before you go on a program with fresh fruit or some other varieties that mature at different times.
Yes, exactly. I mean, for fresh fruit, even if our fruit quality is same, there is no effect on the bricks. Peel color is going to affect how the fresh fruit is sold or is perceived by the customers. So that is one thing. Now, our fresh fruit variety people are very much familiar with degreening processes using ethylene to color up the fruit. And that should work out too. So if growers are using gibberellic acid on the fresh fruit variety, degreening is an option and they can definitely try it out.
Okay.
And I'm working with Dr. right now or this year to see if we can do some work on grapefruits to look at fruit.
Well, you just answered my next question. Have you done anything to look at degreening of these fruit that have been treated with gibberellic acid? So, okay, so that work's ongoing. And one of the things, a good transition, you mentioned ethylene production and to degreen. But ethylene also plays a role in the field in terms of fruit drop. And you are working with another plant growth regulator to combat the effects of ethylene on fruit drop. Yes. And so can you explain a little more about that work? It's 2,4-D we're talking about.
Yes. So ethylene, it's another plant hormone that is produced naturally. Anytime the tree is stressed, it produces ethylene. And when the fruit drop happens, actually, the fruit starts to perceive more ethylene and then the drop happens. Now, 2,4-D is a plant growth regulator, and it does what auxin, that's another plant hormone, does. Auxin and ethylene counteracts each other. So having 2,4-D, which is a substitute for auxin in this case, can counteract ethylene effects. And we are seeing when we are applying 2,4-D, we do see reduction in fruit drop. And we have applied 2,4-D and gibberellic acid together, and we see the best results. Now, we started this work only last year. We have been applying gibberellic acid and 2,4-D in October through December. And we are seeing reduction in fruit drop, about 20% reduction in fruit drop when they were applied in combination.
And so, I think as we were talking earlier, that trial work you're doing, you've tested gibberellic acid by itself, 2,4-D by itself, and then the combination of the two. And it's that combination of both 2,4-D and gibberellic acid. Which months was it? It was 3 months in a row.
October, November, December, 3 applications.
So you were getting the best effects with that.
Yes.
And so I know, 2,4-D, we're learning how to use that in this situation. There are some label changes that are probably going to be needed with that compound. Right now, I think it's only labeled for possibly one application.
Yes, it is. It is labeled for one application between November and December at 3.2 fluid ounce per acre.
Okay.
In our study, we applied October, November, December. So we essentially did 3 applications, but we did it at a lower rate. So we did not go above 3.2 fluid ounces. So we are doing smaller doses, but frequent doses. And the reason for that is that we have been seeing that the fruit drop signals arise earlier in the fruit. So if January is when you expect your Valencia to be dropping, we are seeing these signals from October, November timeframe. And that's why I precisely applied these PGRs at these times when those signals are arising so we can counteract them when they're arising.
Okay.
Too late is of no benefit. We probably need to start early on these PGRs based on what we know from fruit drop. And GA and 2,4-D together are working really good. I would like to say that 2,4-D is helping with the fruit drop. GA is also helping with the fruit drop and helping with vegetative flush and other tree defense responses. So both have their own set of benefits, and we are seeing a synergistic effect when we apply it together.
That's very interesting because, again, gibberellic acid is it's a different hormone. It's affecting different processes within the plant than 2,4-D, which is the, if I get this right, auxin type substitute.
Yes.
And so, and again, I think to reemphasize your point, why you're using the multiple applications of 2,4-D is that there are more than one time period in the fall that's important to counteract or to correct in order to set that good crop, or I'm sorry, to prevent the fruit drops, what I should say.
Yes.
And so that's why you don't think one application of 2,4-D is enough. It's really going to take a couple.
Exactly. We need more than one application. And Dr. Albrigo, a few years ago, he had done a lot of work with gibberellic acid and 2,4-D. And in most of his work, he was using one application, maybe two at some trials. And he never saw similar level of benefit that I have been seeing. And I think one of the main reason is we are looking into multiple applications now. And also we are timing the application since we have learned so much more about fruit drop in these years.
Yeah, and I think that's good to point out is that, we've been dealing with HLB for such a long time. There's been a lot of research that's happened. A lot of the results initially aren't that useful for growers or what they're doing in the field, but it's really all coming together as we look at nutrition and plant growth regulators and how we can take all this together to make a program that's going to have a positive impact on the health of trees and ultimately the yield and fruit quality in terms of nutrition, things like that. So, in terms of 2,4-D, your suggestion, if people are going to consider 2,4-D applications, the timing again on that for Valencia, and then maybe talk about Hamlin.
So for Valencia, we tried October, November, December. That's where I have seen the most benefit so far for fruit drop reduction.
Okay.
If we were to apply for Hamlin being a early variety, and you would expect it to be harvested in December, and 2,4-D also keeps the fruit green. So that is one thing to keep in mind. So we would want to stop our sprays by October in that very case.
So about 60 days before harvest.
Yes, again, 2 months. So August, September, October, or July, maybe starting. Now I will have to say that the label says November through December.
And only one application right now.
One application. But as we learn more, we can work with the company, I believe.
Yeah, and I think that's important because, the labels that are out there and when I was working with insecticides, a lot of times the labels, when they're developed by a company, they don't have all the uses in mind, or we don't know what all we need to use that product for at the time that it's labeled. And so here we've had these products labeled in citrus for decades, but we didn't have HLB. And so now as we're learning how they could be effective in managing HLB, we need to tweak those labels a little bit. And so I know Valent's been good. They've worked with us to change the labels for gibberellic acid. And so with ProGib, for example, I think it now allows at least 4 applications.
August through December, 4
applications. And I'm sure we'll see some changes to the 2,4-D label as well in the future. So again, the research really kind of helps drive how we can change these labels to be more effective for growers. So we'll kind of start wrapping up here with just some questions about applications in the field. I know growers may have some questions about how to use this, the timing in terms of there's a lot of talk about day versus night. And have you seen any benefit applying gibberellic acid at night versus the daytime?
So I haven't. First, I looked through the literature, and there is not much literature on night applications of gibberellic acid being more efficient than day. Actually, there is not much literature to even make the comparison. We have done some small scale greenhouse studies so far, just because growers have been asking these questions and we want to get some answers. So we applied the gibberellic acid at night and we applied the gibberellic acid in the morning, same rate on same trees, similar trees. And what we are seeing is that initially the response is a bit quicker with the night application, but in a week or 2 weeks, the effect is same. So maybe you may see leaves sprouting a little bit early with the night application, but in a week, we have the same number of leaves, same number of branches. So over long time, and here I'm just talking about a few weeks, the effect is about the same. So then we really need to think, what is our goal with these applications and the risk versus reward?
Yeah. So for a grower, they're thinking, okay, do I want to put my employees out in the groves after dark at night by themselves spraying? Is it really worth the benefit? And based on what you're seeing, the nighttime sprays work a little faster, but ultimately a week down the road, you see no difference in overall effect.
Yes.
Okay. And I think the reason that there's the idea about spraying at night has to do with stomates being open and I guess allowing the material to get into the plant easier. Is that what the rationale is?
So it gives more time for the tree to absorb the nutrients, of course. And but if you are using a surfactant, I think you can overcome some of those difficulties.
Yeah, and I think with any kind of product we want to move into the tree, you can artificially do this with a surfactant. And so you've been using, what surfactants have you been using with these PGRs?
So I have been pretty consistent with using Induce, which is an organosilicone. We have been using it pretty steadily. Anytime I put out any PGR, no matter which PGR it is, we always use organosilicone surfactant, Induce in this case specifically.
And what rate of that organosilicone?
We are using 0.15% of the total spray volume.
Okay. And that's probably not the only thing when growers in the field, you want to kind of get the most bang from your buck as you drive that tractor through. So there's always something else going in the mix, probably 4 or 5 different products at times. Have you heard of any issues with tank mixing? I've been out and I've seen some growers doing, making gibberellic acid sprays, mixing with insecticides and oils, and haven't seen an issue yet. But have you run into any problems with tank mixing gibberellic acid or other PGRs?
So the label says not to tank mix because we just know limited about it. But I have been talking to growers and most part, none of the growers have reported any phytotox responses so far. They have been applying it with insecticides, with nutritional products, oils, and they have not seen any problem. Except one grower did report last year around November time when they sprayed on their young block, they did see phytotox response. Now they sprayed 3 or 4 blocks, only one block showed this phytotox response. And it seems like the day when they sprayed, it was a pretty warm day, and they had an insecticide with it. So that could be one of the reasons, because when we repeated the same chemistry in another block, but the day was a bit cooler, we got into December, by the time we could spray, we did not see a phytotox response. So I think time of the day really has something to do with it. And also ultimately what the pH of your solution is can also cause some phytotox responses. So overall, no phytotox reported so far.
But I'm sure if any growers do experience a phytotoxic response with any of these PGRs, we would love to hear about it.
Exactly.
Just even though it's anecdotal evidence, it helps us, and we can pass that on to folks, because again, we can't test every possible combination of products and varieties and time of year and weather conditions. So things happen sometimes. So we would love to hear it if there are problems that pop up. But so far, we feel pretty confident. I mean, this is a naturally occurring plant hormone. The downside to applying it in general, if you're following the guidelines we've talked about, there's a lot of benefits from doing this. Again, these plant growth regulators aren't the one solution to everything that's HLB. I mean, we've got to start off with a good nutrition program, give it that foundation. But these are tools that can help keep that tree in balance, bring all the plant hormones into balance so the tree can function as it needs to, produce good quality fruit, and retain that fruit so we actually have something to pick and sell. So Tripti, we look forward to seeing more of your research in the future, the results as you continue to work on these and other plant growth regulators. And so we just thank you for your work and keep up the good work.
Thank you.